The vastness of space swallowed sound, but not violence. Not today. Eris Thorne's hands trembled as he worked, the surgical laser wavering slightly as he tried to stabilize the severed artery in his patient's chest cavity. Around him, the UNS Hope's medical bay hummed with the orchestrated chaos of emergency medicine. Nurses calling vitals, assistants prepping plasma, monitors beeping with the reassuring rhythm of persisting life. BP dropping, doctor, called the nurse across the table. We need to close soon. Thorne nodded without looking up. His focus narrowed to the millimeter-precise work before him, a colonist miner crushed when tectonic instability had collapsed his tunnel. Just another day aboard the United Nations Space Hospital ship Hope, the largest hospital vessel in Earth's humanitarian fleet. Almost there, he murmured, more to himself than anyone. Just need to. The ship lurched violently. Thorne's laser sliced sideways, missing the artery entirely. Warning klaxons immediately began to wail. What the hell? He shouted, regaining his balance and redirecting the beam. Unknown vessels approaching, came the automated announcement. All personnel to safety stations. The surgical team exchanged worried glances, but their training held. They continued working, hands steady despite the fear crawling up their spines. UNS Hope was a hospital ship, massive, unmistakably marked with a crimson cross against white that had signified medical neutrality for centuries. Nobody attacked hospital ships. It was one of the few laws of war that still held across the vastness of space. Captain Eva Rostova's voice cut through the alarm. All personnel, this is not a drill. We have multiple unidentified vessels on approach vector. They're not responding to hails. Secure all patients and prepare for possible impact. Thorne felt cold sweat beading on his forehead as he worked faster. Nurse, clamps. We need to get this patient secure. The first impact came just as they were closing, a distant thud followed by the shriek of tearing metal. The lights flickered, then steadied. Incoming, someone shouted from the corridor. There was no time to process what was happening. The second impact hit much closer, a deafening explosion that threw Thorne against the wall. Pain lanced through his shoulder. The operating room plunged into darkness before emergency lights bathed everything in a sickly red glow. Everyone okay? Thorne called, pushing himself upright. His ears rang, the world seeming distant and muffled. Through the haze, he saw his patient still on the table, his nurse sprawled across the floor, unmoving. He staggered his feet just as the doors burst open. Rostova stood there, blood streaming from a cut above her eye, her security uniform torn and singed. Dr. Thorne, we need to evacuate. Now. But my patient. They're targeting the medical bays specifically. She cut him off, her voice clinical, but eyes wild with disbelief. They know exactly what we are, and they're still firing. We have 5 minutes before this section decompresses. Thorne felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with his injuries. Who, he demanded. Who would fire on a hospital ship? Rostova's face hardened. Xylosians. Their biosignatures are unmistakable. The word hit Thorne like another explosion. Xylosians. The alien race whose biology-based technology had earned humanity's fascination and fear in equal measure. The same race that had attacked the frontier colony where his family had been stationed 5 years ago. His wife, his daughter, both gone in an attack the Xylosian government had claimed was a regrettable misunderstanding. And now this, firing on an unarmed hospital ship. There was no time for the hatred that surged through him. The ship rocked with another hit. Take anyone who can walk, Rostova ordered. Life pods are this way. The next 20 minutes were a blur of smoke, screams, and desperation. Thorne helped as many patients as he could, guiding them toward the escape pods. Many were too injured to move. Some begged not to be left behind. The choices he made in those moments would haunt him forever. He was shoving a young engineering officer named Kale into a life pod when the bulkhead behind them ruptured. The sudden decompression yanked 3 medical staff into the void before emergency force fields snapped into place. Go! Rostova shouted, physically pushing Thorne into the pod after Kale. She leapt in behind him, slapping the ejection control. The pod's door sealed with a hiss as it blasted away from the dying hospital ship. Through the viewport, they watched in horror as the UNS Hope, 800 meters of gleaming white hull emblazoned with the Red Cross of Mercy, broke apart under concentrated weapons fire from the Xylosian vessels. Escape pods peppered the darkness like dandelion seeds blown from a stem, but far too few for the 3,000 souls that had been aboard. Thorn pressed his palm against the cold viewport, watching the ship that had been his home for 2 years disintegrate into the void. The same ship that had finally given him purpose after losing everything. They knew, he whispered, his voice raw. They knew exactly what we were. Rostova's hand found his shoulder, her grip painfully tight. They'll pay for this, she promised, her voice like steel. Every last one of them. Kale, the young engineer, huddled in the corner of the tiny pod, his eyes wide with shock. But why? We were just helping people. Thorn had no answer that made sense. But as the remains of the Hope scattered across the emptiness of space, he made a silent vow. This would not stand. This time, Earth would answer, and he would be part of that answer, whatever it cost him. The life pod drifted among the debris for 37 hours before an Earth Patrol vessel detected their distress beacon. By then, thirst had become their constant companion, along with the growing realization of what they had survived and who had not. When the rescue ship's tractor beam finally locked onto their pod, Thorn had been awake for nearly 48 hours, unable to close his eyes without seeing the Hope breaking apart, unable to silence the screams of those they'd left behind. The patrol ship's captain met them in the docking bay, her face grave. Dr. Thorn, Captain Rostova, Engineer Kale, you're among the fortunate ones. We've recovered 23 pods so far. Just over 200 survivors. 200 out of 3,000. They were rushed to Earth, given the best medical care, treated like heroes. Media clamored for interviews. Politicians stood solemnly for photos with the brave survivors. Behind closed doors, intelligence officers debriefed them for hours, recording every detail of the unprovoked attack. The Xylosian government issued immediate denials. Their ambassador to Earth claimed it must have been rogue elements, perhaps separatists. They offered condolences, promised investigations. Few believed them. Public outrage swept through Earth's colonies. Protests outside Xylosian embassies turned violent. Military recruitment centers reported lines stretching around blocks. The drums of war beat louder each day. Thorn watched it all with a detachment that worried his doctors. They diagnosed him with severe PTSD, prescribed medications he didn't take, and recommended therapy sessions he didn't attend. The only time he felt anything was when he thought about the Xylosian ships firing on the Hope. Then the rage would burn so hot it threatened to consume him from within. A week after the rescue, Thorn was summoned to Earth Space Command Headquarters in Geneva. He found Rostova and Kale already there, seated in an austere conference room overlooking Lake Geneva. Dr. Thorn, said the white-haired man at the head of the table. I'm Admiral Marcus Vance. Thank you for coming. Thorn nodded, taking a seat beside Rostova. Her military posture hadn't softened, but new lines had appeared around her eyes. I'll be direct, Vance continued, his voice carrying the weight of authority. The attack on the Hope was not just a tragedy. It was a turning point. The Security Council has authorized a proportional military response. About time, Rostova muttered. Vance activated a holographic display in the center of the table. What I'm about to show you is classified at the highest level. The hologram showed what appeared to be a small, sleek spacecraft unlike anything in Earth's current arsenal. It resembled a predatory bird, all sharp angles and aggressive lines. Project Chimera, Vance said. A new class of neural-piloted strike craft. Small, agile, nearly impossible to detect, and more lethal than anything we've deployed before. Kale leaned forward, his engineer's eyes analyzing the design. Neural-piloted? You mean direct brain interface? Precisely. Vance looked directly at Thorn. Dr. Thorn, before you joined the Hope, you were part of the early research team developing neural interfaces for prosthetic limbs. Your work on translating intention to action laid some of the groundwork for this project. Thorn felt suddenly cold. That research was meant to help amputees, not pilot weapons. Technology rarely stays in one lane, Doctor. Vance expanded the hologram to show a facility built into what appeared to be a moon's surface. We've established a training and deployment center on Phobos. The ships are ready. What we need now are pilots. And you want us, Rostova said. It wasn't a question. You three are survivors. You've seen what the Xylosians are capable of. You have motivation that can't be manufactured. Vance swept his gaze across them. We're assembling a volunteer force. The neural interfaces require certain psychological profiles, resilience, adaptability, and yes, controlled anger. You all qualify. Thorne laughed bitterly. You want to turn traumatized survivors into your weapons. I want to give you the chance to ensure what happened to the Hope never happens again, Vance countered. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice and protection. Thorne knew propaganda when he heard it. But as he looked at the sleek ship in the hologram, something dark and hungry stirred within him. Rostova was first to speak. I'm in. When do we start? Kale hesitated, then nodded. If these ships are what you say, I want to help. All eyes turned to Thorne. He should refuse. Return to medicine, to healing. That's what the man he used to be would have done. But that man had died with the Hope. When do we leave for Phobos? He asked. The smile that spread across Vance's face sent a chill down Thorne's spine. It was the smile of a man who had gotten exactly what he wanted. Tomorrow, the Admiral said. We call the program Fury. The Phobos facility was carved directly into the Martian moon, a warren of tunnels, hangars, and laboratories hidden from prying eyes and sensors. The transport that brought Thorne, Rostova, and Kale docked in a massive hangar bay where dozens of the sleek, predatory ships from Vance's hologram sat in neat rows, their black holes absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Beautiful, aren't they? Said a tall woman in a lab coat, meeting them at the airlock. I'm Dr. Eliza Morgan, chief neurologist for Project Chimera. Thorne studied her closely, thin to the point of gauntness, with close-cropped silver hair and eyes that evaluated rather than saw. He recognized the type, brilliant, dedicated, and utterly untroubled by ethical considerations that might impede progress. These are the Fury craft, Kale asked, already moving toward the nearest ship, his fingers itching to touch it. We call them Furies, yes. Morgan gestured for them to follow her deeper into the facility. You'll notice they have no cockpits, no life support systems, nothing that would normally support a human pilot, because they don't need any of that. They passed through security checkpoints into a clinic area that reminded Thorne uncomfortably of the Hope's medical bay. Beds lined the walls, each equipped with neural monitoring equipment and what appeared to be interface terminals. This is where you'll receive your implants, Morgan explained. Neural mesh woven through specific portions of your brain, allowing direct command interface with the ships. And the risks? Thorne asked, professional interest momentarily overwhelming his darker motivations. Morgan met his gaze evenly. Significant. Rejection, neural inflammation, personality changes, dissociative episodes. About 20% of candidates wash out during integration. Another 10% experience complications afterward. Meaning, Rostova pressed. Meaning they find it difficult to separate themselves from the neural network. The line between human and machine becomes blurred. Thorne should have walked away then. The doctor in him recognized all the warning signs of a rushed, dangerous procedure being justified by military necessity. But the survivor in him, the man who had watched the Hope die, merely asked, when do we start? The next week passed in a blur of medical procedures, neural mapping, and the strange sensation of having his brain rewired. Thorne's medical background gave him unique insight into what was happening, and should have terrified him more than it did. The neural mesh being threaded through his brain was far more extensive than anything he had worked on in his research days. This wasn't just about interpreting neural signals. It was about creating a two-way street where the machine could feed information directly back to the pilot. Recovery was brutal. Migraines that left him vomiting, sensory hallucinations, moments of complete dissociation where he couldn't feel his body at all. But each day brought improvement, and with it, the first tastes of what was to come. Today we begin actual interface training. Morgan announced 2 weeks after their arrival. Thorn, Rostova, and Kale have been joined by 47 other volunteers, all survivors or family members of victims from Xylosian attacks, all burning with the same cold fury. They lay in their neural cradles, special chambers designed to minimize external stimuli while maximizing neural connection. Technicians attached monitoring equipment, administer drugs to enhance neural plasticity. Close your eyes, Morgan instructed through the speakers. Imagine yourself expanding beyond the confines of your body. Reaching out, Thorn did as instructed, skeptical at first. Then he felt it, a strange tickling at the edges of his consciousness, like fingers gently probing the boundaries of his mind. That sensation is the interface initializing, Morgan's voice explained. Don't fight it. Invite it in. Imagine opening a door. When the connection snapped into place, Thorn gasped aloud. Suddenly he had more senses, more awareness. He could feel the cradle around him, not just where it touched his skin, but as an entire three-dimensional object. He could sense the electrical systems running through the walls, the slight vibrations from distant machinery. Holy shit, someone whispered from across the room. The voice belonged to a former colony security officer named Malik, but Thorn somehow knew this without looking. He could feel Malik's presence, his astonishment mirroring Thorn's own. You're beginning to sense the network, Morgan confirmed. Each of you is now part of something larger. In time, you'll learn to differentiate between your own perceptions and those shared through the mesh. For now, simply explore the sensation. Over the following days, they progressed from simple awareness to active control. First manipulating virtual objects, then systems within the facility itself. Lights, doors, environmental controls. All could be operated with a thought once they learned the mental language required. Thorn adapted quickly, his neural plasticity higher than most. His medical knowledge helped him conceptualize what was happening, creating mental frameworks that made the interface more intuitive. Rostova struggled initially, her disciplined military mind resisting the intrusion, but soon developed a laser-like precision with her commands that impressed even Morgan. Kale took to it like he'd been born for it, his engineer's curiosity driving him to test boundaries and discover shortcuts no one else had considered. 1 month after their arrival, they were ready for the next phase. Today, Vance announced, having returned to Phobos to witness their progress. You connect with your Furies. The hangar bay had been reconfigured, the 50 sleek black ships now suspended in individual docking cradles. Each volunteer was led to a neural interface station positioned beneath their assigned craft. The process is similar to what you've experienced, Morgan explained, but more intense. The Fury craft have significantly more systems to integrate with. Take it slowly. Thorn lay back in his cradle, watching his technicians prepare the connection. Above him hung Ship 17, his Fury, according to the small designation mark on its ventral surface. From this angle, it looked even more predatory, like a raptor poised to strike. When the connection initiated, it nearly overwhelmed him. The ship's sensory systems flooded his consciousness. Optical arrays, electromagnetic sensors, radiation detectors, all feeding information directly into his brain in a torrent that threatened to drown his sense of self. He gasped, instinctively fighting against the deluge. Distantly, he heard alarms, felt hands on his physical body, heard Morgan barking orders. "Breathe, Thorn," came Rostova's voice, somehow inside his mind rather than through his ears. "Don't fight it. Sort it. Like triage." The medical analogy clicked. Triage, prioritizing information, addressing the most critical first. He began mentally categorizing the sensory inputs, creating hierarchies, filtering out the non-essential. Gradually, the chaos resolved into structured awareness. He could feel the ship, not as a separate entity, but as an extension of himself. Its skin was his skin, its sensors his eyes and ears. When he imagined moving, the ship's stabilizers adjusted minutely in response. I'm connected," he managed to say aloud, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. "Good," Morgan replied. "Now, try to initiate primary systems. Think about power flowing from the core outward." Thorn visualized it and felt the ship respond. Energy hummed through conduits he could sense as clearly as his own veins. Stabilizers engaged fully. Weapon systems came online, a deadly arsenal suddenly at his mental fingertips. The power was intoxicating. "Very good," Morgan said, real excitement in her usually clinical voice. "Now, who's ready to fly?" The simulation chamber was a massive spherical room with full holographic projection capabilities. Within it, the volunteers could experience flight and combat without risking their actual ships. They floated in neural cradles at the center while their minds soared through virtual space. Their first flight was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Thorn found himself flying through a digital recreation of the asteroid belt, weaving between massive rocks at speeds that would have been impossible for human reflexes. But through the neural interface, intention translated to action instantaneously. The ship didn't respond to his commands. It was his commands, an extension of his will. As the training intensified, they progressed from solo flights to coordinated maneuvers. Here, the true potential of the neural mesh revealed itself. When flying in formation, they could share perceptions, creating a distributed awareness that allowed for perfect synchronization. Where one pilot detected a threat, all became instantly aware of it. "You're becoming a single organism with multiple bodies," Morgan explained during a debriefing. "This is what will make you unstoppable. The Xylosians have nothing that can match this level of neural integration." Combat training began in the third month. The simulations became increasingly brutal. Recreations of Xylosian attack ships based on intelligence data, programmed to fight with all the ruthless efficiency the aliens had displayed in real encounters. The first time Thorn destroyed a simulated Xylosian vessel, he felt a surge of savage satisfaction that disturbed him later when he reflected on it. He was becoming something he didn't recognize, a weapon rather than a healer. Yet when he closed his eyes, he still saw the hope breaking apart, still heard the screams of those they couldn't save, and the satisfaction returned. "You're troubled," Rostova observed one night in a mess hall. The neural connection persisted at a low level even when not actively piloting, creating a constant awareness of the other pilot's emotional states. Privacy had become an almost foreign concept. "Wouldn't you be?" Thorn pushed his food around his tray. "We're turning ourselves into something not quite human. We're becoming what's necessary." Rostova leaned closer. "The Xylosians didn't hesitate to fire on a hospital ship. They don't deserve our hesitation in return. And that doesn't scare you? How easily we justify becoming like them." Rostova's eyes hardened. "What scares me is letting them get away with it." For months after they began training, Admiral Vance returned to Phobos with news. "Intelligence has identified a Xylosian outpost in the Kuiper Belt," he announced to the assembled pilots. "We believe it served as a staging point for the attack on the Hope. This will be your first field operation." Thorn felt his heart rate accelerate. Beside him, he sensed Rostova's fierce anticipation and Kale's nervous excitement rippling through the neural network. "The mission is straightforward," Vance continued. "Approach undetected, confirm the target's identity, and eliminate it completely. No survivors, no warning. Show them what happens when they target our medical vessels." No one questioned the orders. No one suggested capturing prisoners or gathering intelligence. The Fury pilots had been shaped by months of shared grief and rage into a single instrument of retribution. The launch was scheduled for 0600 the next morning. That night, Thorn barely slept, his mind cycling between anticipation and doubt. When he finally drifted off, he dreamed of the Hope, but this time he was looking at it from outside, targeting its vulnerable sections, feeling nothing but cold determination as he fired. He woke sweating, unsure which side of the nightmare he truly belonged on. Launch day arrived with a tense electricity running through the facility. The pilots underwent final neural synchronization, their minds linking more deeply than ever before. As they lay in their cradles beneath their ships, Thorne could feel 49 other consciousnesses brushing against his own, their collective purpose crystallizing into something terrifying and magnificent. Neural synchronization at optimal levels, Morgan reported from the control center. All Fury craft reporting green status. Vance stepped forward. Pilots of Operation Retribution, you carry with you the hopes of Earth and the memory of those we've lost. Make it count. The neural cradles retracted into shielded compartments as the hangar bay doors began to open, revealing the rust-red curve of Mars below and the star-flecked blackness beyond. 50 Fury craft hung suspended, their matte black hulls absorbing light like hungry shadows. Launch sequence initiating, came the controller's voice. Thorne felt rather than heard the countdown, sensed the growing anticipation rippling through the neural network. When the signal came, 50 ships launched as one, streaking from Phobos in perfect formation, accelerating with a synchronicity no human reflexes could have achieved. The sensation was unlike anything Thorne had experienced. His physical body remained in the neural cradle on Phobos, but his consciousness soared with the ship, feeling the cold vacuum of space against its hull as if it were his own skin, sensing radiation and gravitational fluctuations, moving with a freedom no human body could ever know. The Fury squadron accelerated to relativistic velocities, the specialized engines allowing them to traverse the vast distance to the Kuiper Belt in hours rather than months. Throughout the journey, they maintained neural connection, their minds flowing together in a collective consciousness that was both exhilarating and disturbing. Individual thoughts remained private, but emotions, sensations, and tactical awareness were shared instantaneously. Approaching the target coordinates, they decelerated and deployed in attack formation. The Xylosian outpost came into sensor range, a collection of biomechanical structures anchored to a small, icy planetoid, glowing with the distinctive energy signature of Xylosian technology. Target confirmed. Rostova communicated through the network, her thoughts crisp and military precise. Life signs detected. Approximately 200 Xylosian personnel. 200 lives. The exact number of survivors from the Hope. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone in the network. Weapons hot, came a collective thought. No one was sure who initiated it, but all embraced it. The attack was over in less than 3 minutes. The Fury squadron struck from multiple vectors simultaneously, their advanced weapons systems cutting through the outpost defenses before the Xylosians could mount an effective response. Thorne felt the destructive power flowing through his ship, through him, as he targeted critical systems. Each hit registered not just as tactical data, but as visceral satisfaction. The final structure collapsed in a bloom of escaping atmosphere and debris. No distress calls had been sent, no warning given, just as none had been given to the Hope. Target eliminated. Kale reported through the network, his thoughts tinged with a complex mix of horror and vindication. As they regrouped and began the journey home, the initial elation faded, leaving something more complicated in its wake. Through the neural network, Thorne could sense similar emotional turbulence from the other pilots. The gratification of revenge tempered by the awareness of what they had become. Executioners, the kind of beings who could extinguish 200 lives and feel justified. When they returned to Phobos, Vance was waiting, his face tight with controlled excitement. Perfect execution, he told them. The president has been briefed. Operation Retribution is now authorized for full deployment. Full deployment. Thorne realized this had been a test run, a proof of concept. What came next would be on a much larger scale. That night, the dreams came worse than before. In them, Thorne could feel the deaths he had caused, not as abstract tactical data, but as terror and pain transmitted through the neural interface. He woke choking on his own screams, the sheets soaked with sweat. Across the facility, other pilots were experiencing similar nightmares. The neural network hummed with their collective distress, amplifying each individual's trauma. The medical staff rushed to administer sedatives, but the damage was done. Whatever barriers had existed between individual minds were growing thinner. The following weeks brought a rapid escalation. The Fury Squadron launched successive strikes against Xylosian outposts, supply depots, and eventually military installations deeper in their territory. Each mission was executed with ruthless efficiency, the neural network allowing for tactics no conventional force could match. Earth celebrated these victories. Media outlets played heavily edited footage of the strikes, portraying the Fury pilots as avenging angels delivering righteous judgment. Few questioned the morality of the campaign or its long-term consequences. But within the Phobos facility, the toll became increasingly evident. The neural mesh technology had side effects no one had fully anticipated, or that Vance had chosen to ignore. The persistent connection between pilots created a bleed-through effect, where emotions and even memories began to transfer. Thorne sometimes woke with vivid recollections of events he had never experienced. Rostova's military training, Kale's childhood on the lunar colonies, another pilot's loss of family in a Xylosian raid. Worse were the phantom sensations during combat, the echo of Xylosian deaths rippling through the neural network. Their targeting systems were so precise that they could distinguish individual life signs. When those signatures winked out, something transferred through the interface. Not quite pain, not quite fear, but the unmistakable sensation of consciousness terminating. Despite Morgan's best efforts to modify the interface and minimize these effects, they persisted. Several pilots suffered complete psychological breaks, their sense of self dissolving into the collective. Others developed a disturbing bloodlust, reveling in the destructive power at their command. Thorne watched it happening, to himself and the others, but felt powerless to stop it. The mission continued, driven by Vance's unwavering determination and Earth's thirst for retribution. The turning point came unexpectedly. During a particularly intense strike against a Xylosian military installation, Thorne's ship was damaged by a new defensive weapon, something that disrupted the neural interface, causing feedback that felt like his brain was being shredded. As he struggled to maintain control, his neural patterns destabilized, sending him plunging much deeper into the Xylosian systems than should have been possible. In that moment of broken boundaries, he touched something unexpected: Xylosian neural networks, their own form of shared consciousness. And within it, fragments of truth that changed everything. The attack on the Hope hadn't been sanctioned by the Xylosian central government. It had been carried out by a radical military faction convinced that the hospital ship was harboring a dangerous bioweapon, one designed specifically to target Xylosian biology. They had attacked out of fear, believing they were preventing an even greater atrocity. And the bioweapon they feared? Its theoretical foundation had come from Thorne's own early research, repurposed by military scientists without his knowledge. When Thorne returned to Phobos, barely managing to land his damaged ship, he was shaking with the implications. He went directly to Vance's office, still in his interface suit, neural connections only partially disengaged. "You knew," he accused, bursting through the door. "You knew it wasn't their government. You knew why they attacked." Vance looked up calmly from his desk, unsurprised. "Dr. Thorne, I'm glad to see you survived. Answer me." Thorne slammed his hands on the desk. "Did you know? We had indications." Vance's voice remained measured. "Intelligence suggested the attack was carried out by hardliners. Yes. Does it matter? They still fired on a hospital ship." "It matters," Thorne hissed, "because we've been executing the wrong people. Because this whole war could have been prevented. Because you're using us to eliminate the Xylosians entirely, not just deliver justice." "I'm using you to ensure humanity's survival," Vance countered, standing to face Thorne. "The Xylosians have technology decades beyond ours. The only advantage we have is their internal divisions and our Fury program. I will use both to secure our future. By making us into monsters?" Thorne could feel the other pilots sensing his distress through the neural network, their confusion and concern rippling back to him. "By making you into what's necessary." Vance's eyes hardened. "And now that I know the neural connections can penetrate Xylosian networks, we have an even greater advantage. Imagine it, Thorne, we could hijack their entire neural infrastructure." Thorne stared at the Admiral, finally seeing the man clearly. This was never about justice for the Hope. You've been planning this all along. The Hope gave us the perfect justification, Vance admitted. Public support, volunteer pilots with the right psychological profile, moral authority. But yes, this strategy was in development long before. Sometimes opportunity and preparation meet in fortunate ways. Thorne backed away, revulsion churning in his gut. I won't be part of this anymore. You don't have a choice. Vance's voice took on a dangerous edge. The neural mesh can't be removed without causing catastrophic brain damage. You're a Fury pilot until you die, Dr. Thorne. And tomorrow, you fly the most important mission yet, the destruction of their central colony world. Genocide, Thorne whispered. You're ordering genocide. I'm ordering the end of a threat. Vance sat back down, his posture indicating the conversation was over. Be ready at 0600. Thorne left in a daze, his mind racing through options that all seemed impossible. The neural network thrummed with his distress, connecting him to the other pilots whether he wanted it or not. He could feel their questions, their concern. In his quarters, he found Rostova and Kale waiting, along with several other pilots drawn by his emotional turmoil transmitted through the network. What happened out there? Rostova demanded. We all felt something. Thorne looked at their faces, people who had become more than friends, more than family. People whose minds had intertwined with his own until the boundaries blurred. Could he ask them to turn against everything they'd been fighting for? I found the truth, he said simply, and then he opened his mind fully to the network, sharing everything he had discovered. The Xylosian faction's fear of a bioweapon, Vance's deliberate exploitation of the Hope tragedy, the planned genocide disguised as justice. The reaction rippled through the neural network like a shockwave. Disbelief, anger, betrayal, confusion. 50 minds processing the same revelation simultaneously, their emotions amplifying one another. It can't be true, Rostova said, but her certainty wavered. After everything we've done, I felt it directly from their network, Thor insisted. And Vance didn't deny it. He all but confirmed it. Kale sank onto Thorne's bunk, his face ashen. So we've been killing people who had nothing to do with the Hope. We've been the aggressors. Not all of them were innocent, Thorne clarified. The faction that attacked the Hope was real. But most Xylosians had no part in it. And tomorrow, Vance wants us to attack their most populated world. Silence fell as the implications sank. Through the network, Thorne could sense the others wrestling with the truth, their certainties crumbling. What can we do? Someone finally asked. We can't exactly walk away. No, Thorne agreed. But we can choose a different target. The plan came together rapidly, flowing through the neural network as each pilot contributed ideas, strategies, and skills. The mesh technology that had made them weapons could also make them saviors. Instead of attacking the Xylosian homeworld, Thorne explained, we redirect to the military compound where the radical faction is headquartered. But we don't destroy it. We use our neural connection to infiltrate their network and broadcast the truth to both sides. Vance will try to stop us, Rostova warned, her tactical mind already gaming out scenarios. He'll activate the fail-safes built into our neural interfaces. Not if Kale disables them first, Thorne countered, looking at the young engineer. Kale nodded slowly. I've been studying the interface code. There are backdoors I can exploit before launch. But it's risky. If I'm detected, they could fry our neural pathways remotely. And if we succeed, asked Malik, the security officer, what then? We'll be traitors. Thorne had no answer for that. The future beyond tomorrow's mission was a fog none of them could penetrate. But the alternative, becoming instruments of genocide, was unthinkable. We have to try, he said simply. Whatever comes after. Through the night, they prepared in secret. Kale worked feverishly on the neural interface code, creating pathways that would allow them to resist external commands. Others reached out through the network to pilots who hadn't been present for the initial revelation, sharing what they had learned, building consensus. By morning, 43 of the 50 pilots had joined their cause. The remaining 7 either couldn't be convinced or were too deeply committed to the path of vengeance to to change course. When the launch countdown began, Thorne could feel the tension humming through the neural network. Fear, determination, and the strange exhilaration of claiming their own agency after months of being weapons in someone else's war. Neural synchronization complete, came Morgan's voice over the comm. All Fury craft showing green status. Vance's face appeared on their visual feeds. Pilots of Operation Retribution, today you deliver the final blow. The Xylosian Central Colony harbors the leadership that has pursued aggression against humanity. Your target coordinates have been uploaded. Complete destruction is authorized and expected. Thorne felt the familiar sensation of launch, his consciousness expanding into the ship as it streaked away from Phobos with the rest of the squadron. For several minutes, they maintained the expected course, accelerating toward the Xylosian home system. Prepare for neural override. Kale communicated through the private channel he had established within network. 3, 2, 1, now. A jolt of pain lanced through Thorne's mind as Kale's program activated, severing the command links that would have allowed Phobos control to override their neural interfaces. For a terrifying moment, his connection to his ship wavered, threatening to dissolve entirely. Then it stabilized, now fully under his control. What's happening? Vance's voice crackled over the comm. Fury Squadron, you're deviating from course. Return to assigned vector immediately. We know the truth, Admiral, Thorne replied, speaking for the squadron. We know about the faction that attacked the Hope. We know you've been planning this war all along. You're experiencing neural degradation, Dr. Thorne, Vance said, his voice hardening. Your judgment is compromised. All pilots, this is a direct order. Restrain Thorne and return to your assigned mission. 7 ships broke formation, turning back toward the main squadron. The pilots who had refused to join the rebellion. We have company, Rostova warned through the network. And I'm detecting Earth warships on intercept course. Vance must have had them standing by in case we went rogue. Stay on course, Thorne urged. We need to reach the faction's headquarters before they can stop us. What followed was a desperate race across the void. The Rebel Fury ships pushed their engines beyond safety tolerances, their pilots ignoring the warnings, screaming through their neural interfaces. Behind them, the loyal Furies pursued, joined by conventional Earth warships responding to Vance's orders. As they approached Xylosian space, new contacts appeared on their sensors. Xylosian defense ships moving to intercept the incoming human vessels. This is about to get very complicated, Kale observed, his thought voice tight with tension. The Rebel Furies reached the edge of the Xylosian system first, their superior speed giving them a critical advantage. Immediately, they were targeted by Xylosian defense systems, energy weapons lancing through space toward them. Evasive maneuvers only, Thorne ordered through the network. No return fire unless absolutely necessary. We need them to listen, not fight. The Fury ships danced through the barrage, their neural interfaces allowing the pilots to react with impossible speed and coordination. Several took hits, but remained functional. Approaching faction headquarters, Rostova reported. It's the station in orbit around the third moon. The structure loomed in their sensors, a massive biomechanical construct bristling with weapons and surrounded by defensive ships. Exactly the kind of hardened military target they have been trained to destroy. Begin broadcast, Thorne commanded. As one, the 36 Rebel Furies projected a combined neural signal toward the station, using the techniques Thorne had accidentally discovered during his damaged ship encounter with the Xylosian network. The sensation was disorienting. Human minds reaching into alien neural architecture, searching for pathways to communicate. Thorne pushed with all his mental strength, focusing on a simple message. We know the truth. We want to end this conflict. Listen. At first, there was only resistance, alien minds recoiling from the intrusion. Then gradually curiosity, connections forming. Behind them, the pursuing Earth ships entered the system, immediately engaging with Xylosian defenders. Space lit up with weapons fire as a battle erupted around them. We're running out of time, Kale warned. Vance will order them to target us directly soon. Thorn pushed harder into the Xylosian network, no longer trying to communicate with words, but with raw experience. The attack on the Hope, his discovery of the truth, Vance's admission and plans for genocide. Pure information, unfiltered by language or cultural differences. Something shifted in the alien network. Understanding, then alarm. They're getting it, Thorn told the others. His thought was cut short as a massive energy burst struck his ship, sending feedback screaming through his neural interface. One of the loyal Fury pilots had broken through the defensive screen and targeted him directly. Thorn, Rostova's mental voice reached through the pain. Stay with us. He fought to maintain consciousness, to hold the connection with both his ship and the Xylosian network. Through wavering sensors, he saw the battle intensifying. Xylosian ships engaging Earth vessels, loyal Furies attacking rebels, chaos spiraling in all directions. We need to show them all the truth. He managed to communicate through the network. Not just a faction, everyone. With a final, desperate effort, Thorn channeled all his remaining energy into the neural broadcast, expanding it to include not just the faction headquarters, but all Xylosian networks in range, and simultaneously transmitting back to the Earth ships and the pursuing Furies. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Across the battlefield, ships faltered as their crews and pilots were suddenly flooded with unfiltered truth. The fear that had driven the faction to attack the Hope, the manipulation that had turned tragedy into justification for war, the plans for genocide that would have ended any hope for peace. Cease fire, came a new voice over the common channel, the commander of one of the Earth warships. All Earth vessels, cease fire immediately. We're receiving. I don't know what this is, but we're receiving information indicating serious command malfeasance. The Xylosian ships also began standing down, their coordinated movements suggesting a similar realization spreading through their own command structure. In orbit around the faction's headquarters, Thorn's damaged ship drifted, his consciousness flickering as systems failed around him. Through the fading neural connection, he sensed rather than saw the other rebel Furies forming a protective screen around him. Stay with us, Thorn, Rostova urged, her ship maneuvering alongside his. Medical team is en route from the Earth flagship. Did we do it? He managed to ask, his neural voice weak. Did we stop it? Yes, came Kale's response, filled with wonder. They're talking. Both sides. Actually talking. As darkness claimed him, Thorn felt a profound sense of rightness. They had done what the Hope had been meant to do all along. Heal rather than harm. Bridge divides rather than widen them. It was enough. The recovery took months. Not just for Thorn's physical injuries, but for the neural damage all the Fury pilots had sustained. The interface technology had changed them permanently, creating pathways in their brains that could never be fully removed. When Thorn finally regained full consciousness in a medical facility on Earth's moon, Rostova was sitting beside his bed, her face thinner, but her eyes clearer than he had seen them since before the Hope. "Welcome back," she said simply. "The others," he asked, his voice rough. "From disuse. Most survived. A few didn't make it." Her expression clouded momentarily. Kale's well, driving the medical staff crazy with his suggestions for improving their equipment. Thorn smiled weakly. "And what happened? With Earth and the Xylosians?" "That's complicated." Rostova leaned forward. "Vance is facing court-martial. The evidence we transmitted was damning. The president has disavowed his actions and opened direct diplomatic channels with the Xylosian central government. The faction that attacked the Hope, dissolved by their own leadership once the truth came out." She paused. Both sides were being manipulated, Thorn. The faction was fed false intelligence about bioweapons. Vance exploited the resulting tragedy. Neither entire civilization wanted this war. Thorn absorbed this, feeling both vindication and sorrow. So many lives lost to fear and manipulation. "And us?" he asked finally. "The Fury pilots?" Rostova's expression grew complex. "That's even more complicated. We're changed. The neural interfaces altered us in ways they're still trying to understand. We can go back to who we were." "I don't think I want to," Thorn admitted. "Not completely. None of us do. She touched his hand, and he felt the ghost of a neural connection between them. Weaker without the interface technology, but not entirely gone. They've offered us a choice. We can undergo experimental procedures to try to remove more of the neural adaptations, or we could become something new. Intermediaries. The neural changes give us unique abilities to interface between human and Xylosian communication systems. We understand both sides in ways no one else can. Thorne considered this. Healers rather than weapons. Something like that. She smiled faintly. It won't be easy. There's still anger on both sides. Trust will take years to build. But they need us, Thorne. Both sides need what we've become. 5 years later, Thorne stood at the observation deck of the newly constructed Joint Earth-Xylosian diplomatic station. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, he could see the memorial that had been erected in the space where the UNS Hope had been destroyed, a crystalline structure that captured light from the distant sun and fractured it into patterns of extraordinary beauty. His neural implants had been modified but not removed. Like all the surviving Fury pilots, he existed now in a unique state, not fully human in the conventional sense, but not the weapon he had nearly become. The neural adaptations allowed him to serve as a bridge between species whose modes of thought were fundamentally different. Cale joined him at the viewport, his youthful enthusiasm now tempered by experience but not extinguished. The new medical exchange program launches tomorrow, he said. First batch of human doctors heading to Xylosian medical academies, and vice versa. I know, Thorne replied with a smile. I'm leading the orientation. Full circle for you, Cale observed. Back to medicine after all. Not exactly the same medicine. Thorne touched the barely visible interface node at his temple. But the purpose is the same. Healing. Rostova appeared from a nearby conference room, now wearing the insignia of the Joint Security Force, the integrated unit responsible for maintaining peace in shared space. Another border incident resolved, she reported. Minor misunderstanding about resource rights. Getting easier? Thorne asked. Slowly. She joined them at the viewport. The hardliners on both sides still cause problems. Old hatreds die hard. Through his neural enhancements, Thorne could sense the complex emotions beneath her words. Frustration, determination, cautious hope. The same mixture he felt himself most days. We almost became the very thing we were fighting against, he said quietly, watching the light play through the Hope Memorial. A force of destruction aimed by someone else's hatred. But we didn't, Cale reminded him. We made a different choice. That's what matters in the end, Rostova added. Not what happens to us, but the choices we make with what we're given. Thorne nodded, his gaze fixed on the memorial. The hope had been destroyed, but what it had stood for, healing, compassion, the belief that different beings could help rather than harm each other, had survived. Not without cost, not without scars, but it had survived. He still visited the memory of the hope in his dreams sometimes. Not with rage now, but with respect for what it had represented and what its destruction had nearly turned him into. The scar remained, a reminder of how easily healing could be twisted into harm, how revenge could corrupt even the most righteous cause. But scars also marked healing, tissue knitted back together, stronger at the broken places. The neural connections that had nearly made him a perfect killing machine now allowed him to build understanding where none had existed before. From the ashes of the hope, something new had grown. Not perfect, not without pain, but alive with possibility. And in that, Thorne had found a purpose worth serving. Not fury, but hope itself.